So to shift gears, and this is an important one as we turn the page, we sort of said last week that it really does feel like we're watching or living in the moment where history is sort of unfolding before our eyes, or for many of us, maybe even participating in that moment in history. Coronavirus is certainly, a big story there. We did a poll last week, and many of us on this webinar, many of you, also thought that the current racial justice movement will be actually the event that is more remembered in the history books, or have the more profound influence on where we go as a people. And it's something we wanted to talk about, and we've had a lot of sort of internal conversation about what is the appropriate way for us to share any of our ideas or thoughts out in a webinar format on a Friday afternoon, no less. And we sort of landed on, our best way of adding to the conversation is just to add to the conversation in a way that I think Datassential uniquely can, to show you what's happening in the world of food, provide a little insight into what people are thinking, and then share out some really great examples of things that I think can be inspiring for all of us. And that's what Jamie and Holly are here to joining me to help do today. And to get that conversation started, I wanted to share just a couple of stats. This is one that we showed last week, but it's an important segue for us. It's that 58%, a majority of consumers, saying that the coverage of the protests has reminded them there are other things in this world that we need to focus on beyond just coronavirus. Think of how hard it has been to shake us free of the COVID news cycle, and how you needed essentially a seismic event to make that happen, and something that we all inherently know is going to have just a big impact on society and change the world, and hopefully in a much more positive direction. This has happened, right? Something more significant in many ways has come along, and you've seen many companies, perhaps even a majority of companies, putting out statements of support for the movement, which is wonderful. But consumers do say something. 75% say it's important that companies continue to demonstrate the support in the long term, not just now in the moment, right? Not just making that one-time statement. And we did research on this, and I think some of this will become available in the next week or so that we'll post for free. But we tested like lots of different ideas, and we asked people what things they support, what things they don't support, how they feel about certain issues. And there is a very clear split, not so much just demographically, but also based on your political affiliation, where the numbers just swing really wildly in one direction or the other. But this is the number that is actually fairly strong and consistent regardless of which side of the political debate you're on. That people feel like, hey, if you're gonna do something, really mean it, stand by it, and do something meaningful for the long run. Go beyond just that statement of the moment. So I think this is a sentiment that almost everyone can get behind. And we'd like to use that as sort of a jumping point for just some things that we're seeing in the world.
Maven in San Francisco here did something similar, where they're using what they have already to get their personal message and values across. And instead of doing beer bottles, they added this message to their menus. And now that operators are mostly doing single use or paper menus, there's room to add this type of messaging and kind of switch it out as you see fit. And they even added a mask to the silhouette of their signature logo, which I thought was a nice touch. But yeah, I mean, brands are going further than just issuing a blanket statement on their sites. And they're taking it a step further by putting this on their menus or on their bottles. And they donated all profits from the first week of June as well to the George Floyd Memorial Fund.
All right. I think those are some really important examples of independent business owners activating at a grassroots level and supporting it. But I think, as Jack said up at the beginning, This is such a huge moment in time, and across industries, it's sparked a shift in how we talk about this. And we're noticing a lot of industry leaders put out statements that really have substance. And this is one from the James Beard Foundation that acknowledges their silence. Maybe they waited a little bit too long before they crafted a statement, but also acknowledges a couple other things. They're all white leadership team, they're largely white board of directors, and the fundamental disparities between the Black and brown food service workers making our food, preparing it, serving it to us, and the privilege, the economic privilege that it comes with eating out. So this was a really powerful statement for our industry, one that has accountability tied to it. And if you want to flip, Jack, beep. Closer to home, we have the Boca Restaurant Group. You might know this group because they own Stephanie Izzard's Girl and the Goat, which you've likely heard of. They also acknowledge the need to do better, outlining specific action steps for hiring, mentorship, and amplifying Black voices, lifting up the Black voices in our industry and listening to what they have to say. Along to with donations, I love the touch that they made to Chicago Children's Choir. It feels like a very beautiful, graceful touch to lift up something that benefits kids and is music and kind of good for humanity and the soul. But they also leaned into food. They were delivering food to communities on the south and west sides where there has been a disproportionate impact on the Black community due to coronavirus and the protests in the community. You can flip. And then next up is the Kraft Heinz statement that was released this past Monday from their CEO, Miguel Patricio. And for a company as large as Kraft to publicly outline and commit to this these steps with such specificity, that felt really powerful to me. And some things that stand out here to me in the language they use. We at Kraft Heinz say Black Lives Matter. They're not shying away from saying it out loud, not letting it be taboo anymore, bolding the fact that we demand diversity, and also conversations with their African American business resource group, talking to those directly affected by issues of systemic racism, hearing what they need. And when I read through this bulleted list, it strikes me as a blueprint of the critical first steps that begin with transformational change. And just kudos to Kraft Heinz. I thought this was a really powerful first step. And our next one is Ben & Jerry's, which you guys probably, I think if you work in our industry, you probably were paying a lot of attention to this, and they used really bold languages. Probably one of the few large-scale global companies that went deep on this issue. It strikes a different tone than what Kraft Heinz said. Their message was unequivocally clear on their outrage, their imperative to speak out, and even called for political and social justice action. You can flip. And why were they able to do this? You know, we don't all get to make these kind of statements, and Ben & Jerry's got to do it because this is part of their DNA. They can outline a social justice plan because, as that Wall Street Journal headline says in the right corner, they've been at it for decades. They've earned their spot in the conversation. And then next up we have Serious Eats. This is one last statement that caught our attention as we wrap up this particular section. If we read that first sentence, it states, they do not currently have a Black person on staff. And Black voices in the media is what ensures the diversity of opinions, ideas, perspectives, and that's critical in our media diet, whether it's food or politics, listening to all sides of the story. So just like we nourish our body with good food, we need to nourish our minds with the media we consume that includes lots of diverse opinions. And I think before 2 weeks ago, these statements, they just weren't made. We didn't talk about them publicly in mass. As we prepared for this, I said, I never thought I'd be talking about this. But here I am, and that just shows me as an individual how we're talking about race is finally starting to change. And like all of these industry leaders that we just touched on, Datassential is having these critical discussions to make sure we have all the diverse voices that add to our passion for discovery and creativity. We do things differently here at Datassential. That's my favorite part of working here. And those gears on those discussions are very much in motion. Thanks to people like Holly and Jack for giving us the space to do it. So, and all of our collective team.
Now, I would say it's really sort of an interesting shift. We've said for a few years now that the next major domain around how people choose or make food decisions, traditionally it's been taste and convenience and affordability and familiarity, but that another domain of personal values would become something really quite important. And we came into 2020 with a very clear message that for the next several years, it seemed that the big shift was going to be about the connection or the conversation about food and climate change or the climate crisis. That stalled a little bit with COVID, and instead we have entirely new conversations arising in this moment right now. And it used to be if you wanted to understand people and how they make food decisions, you really would need to understand their stomach, you got to understand their wallet. But now all of a sudden, you got to understand those things. You have to understand their heart as well too. And I think it's going to be just even more important than ever to understand how people, not just what people think about food, but what people think about themselves and the world as a whole. That personal value space, for those of us that want to think about this as, hey, what does this mean for business? It's going to be an important part going forward. And I could say that almost objectively based on all the data that we've seen.
And next up, sort of related, craft beers. This is Englewood Brews that you're seeing here. And even if you're not from Chicago, Englewood might be on your radar in our industry because Whole Foods opened up a store in the Southside Black community about 4 years ago to address food injustices. And, that has not been without its controversies and challenges, but the commitment to Chicago's Southside neighborhood is not something we see from big brands all that often. And it paves the way for more businesses and economic development in the area. And Englewood Brews is a great example of that. They also are very mission driven, focused on lifting up the community, economic development, and serving as a destination and an anchor in the community. Leslie Roth, who you see here on the right-hand side, that's her partner in business and life on the left, but she was very adamant that she wanted this to be a Black-owned business because she wants to start changing the paradigm of craft beer. Anecdotally, less than 100 of the nation's 7,500 breweries are Black-owned. And if you do the math, best case scenario, you're at 1%. So there's a lot of room there to grow. Personally, my husband's in the beer business. He has been for a really long time. So what we do on vacation and date night is we explore breweries. So this is absolutely on our summer bucket list this year.
So we're going to shift and maybe just show some really interesting examples, just really awesome food too. So
we're going to highlight some unique restaurants of African and Caribbean origin and share some of the backstory. So this is Pierre Thiam, Senegal-raised New York City chef, restaurateur, author, and social activist, best known for bringing West African cuisine to the global fine dining world. And for those of you who were at our Foodscape experience last year, you probably heard him present his vision for growing a wider appreciation of African cuisine and dedication to improving the economic situation in West Africa through sustainable food supply chain. And this right now on the screen is Taronga, which is his first fast casual chain, now has 250 locations in the US, and they celebrate diverse African culture through authentic superfoods like Ethiopian coffee with moringa, or Senegalese black-eyed pea stew, or spicy Ghanaian plantains. And they're buying organic, indigenous, and climate change resilient crops from independent farmers in Africa. what we're showing here is this West Africa's most ancient grain called fonio, and he has a whole TED talk on his rediscovery of this grain, fonio, and we featured it in a salad at Foodscape as well, and it was delicious. It's gluten-free, it has triple the protein, iron, fiber of brown rice, and the best thing is that it cooks in 5 minutes, and it's really versatile with a ton of different applications, both sweet and savory, so you can put it in a bowl or salads or burgers, brownies, cookies, and a lot more. And he was really passionate about bringing this crop on the global stage to eventually, again, transform that West African economy.